Coming up on Network Africa. Floodwaters are still rising in Mozambique in the wake of Cyclone Idai submerging large parts of the country. Doctors in Kenya want the government to stop sending doctors to Cuba for training. And 11 power plants shut down in South Africa as the country battles severe power cuts. Hello and a warm welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shubawale. We begin today in Mozambique, where floodwaters are still rising in the wake of Cyclone Idai submerging large parts of the country. Rescue workers continued overnight to reach those who have been left stranded on rooftops. Aid workers say up to 100,000 people around the port city of Beira are in urgent need of help as they fear the entire town of Buzi could be completely underwater. The storm also caused widespread damage in eastern Zimbabwe, where 89 people have been killed and 200 missing. In Malawi, many more people require medical supplies, food and shelter.
1,000 people are feared dead after a cyclone smashed into Mozambique. Villages have disappeared, roads have been destroyed, homes razed to the ground, communication and power lines cut. The Southern African country's president said he saw bodies floating in the water when he visited the affected area on Monday. 84 deaths have been confirmed, but the president says the number could be over 10 times higher. Cyclone Idai has torn through Mozambique, Malawi and Zimbabwe, bringing a train of destruction and devastating floods. It made landfall near the port city of Beira, home to 500,000 and a gateway for imports to landlocked countries in southern Africa. There, a large dam had burst, making rescue efforts even more complicated. Large swaths of land were completely submerged, and up to 90% of the area is believed to be completely destroyed. The deadly storm has also killed 98 people in Zimbabwe, with a further 200 people missing. Zimbabwe's Treasury Department released $18 million in aid.
Meanwhile, in Kenya, authorities are warning that Cyclone Idai could affect the onset of long rains in the country. Most parts of the country are currently experiencing dry conditions. In a statement by the meteorological agency, seasonal rainfall onset was expected in March over most parts of the country. However, sunny and dry weather conditions are likely to persist over the better part of the country, and more so the eastern sector of the country and northwestern Kenya. Some parts of the country in the north and northeastern regions have been badly affected by the ongoing drought. Deputy President William Ruto today announced the release of $10 million to mitigate the effects of the drought that has affected 865,000 people in 13 countries. Staying with Kenya, the two main unions representing doctors are piling pressure on the government to stop sending doctors to Cuba for training. The union is calling for doctors to be trained locally and end its deal with Cuba following the death of a Kenyan doctor in the country. Local media reports that Dr. Hamizi Juma allegedly took his own life shortly before he was to return home to be with his wife and 8-month-old baby. The medical union says Dr. Juma had reached out and expressed his frustration over the manner in which the government had, in quote, withheld or completely failed to pay the living expenses in a foreign country, end of quote. Last year, Kenya's government brought in about 100 Cuban doctors to plug a shortage of specialist doctors, but this was met with resistance from local doctors who said the Cubans were receiving preferential treatment and earning huge perks. Joining us now is a Kenyan journalist, Cyrus Umbati, to tell us more about this. Hello, Cyrus. Thank you for joining us on Network Africa. Now, what has the relationship been like for both countries importing and exporting doctors?
Well, the issue of the doctors going to Cuba for business or whatever the exchange program they had between Cuba and Kenya still remains a thorny issue because, you know, it was done in a hurry, demand, and there was no proper consultation that was done. So the union doctors have been opposed to the whole process, and they have been demanding that the whole program be cancelled. Up to now, it remains a contentious issue.
Understand this a bit more. What really is the complaints by these doctors, and has the Kenyan government investigated these claims?
Well, the government is yet to talk about the demands by the doctors that the whole program be cancelled for so far since the death was reported. But we know there will be pressure going forward because in any case, this program is almost being completed. It was an exchange program between Cuba and Kenya. The Kenyan doctors who are going to Cuba were going for further studies, kind of, but again, offering that kind of exchange program between the two countries.
Okay, let's look at the tragic death of Dr. Juma now. What is the government doing in response to the death?
And then one from the Cuban government regarding this death. What it is that there is a pressure locally here from the Kenyan side, the doctors. They want action to be taken, the whole program be cancelled, and we're still waiting because the conditions of these doctors was first raised in way back in January. The doctors were sending emails to newsrooms complaining that they are being mistreated there in Cuba, demanding that the whole thing be cancelled. But the government didn't listen to whatever was being raised. And the suicide being reported by this doctor in particular in question, it was kind of a shock and a surprise to the government. But we journalists knew of it. They were aware that they were suffering.
And finally, Cyrus, has the Cuban government so far commented on the situation?
The doctors there have been complaining of poor conditions of living conditions, poor pay, the dictatorship in the kind of, because we remember that country is a socialist country, and they have been saying that the pay they were getting is not what we were kind of promised from here. So those were the main complaints, that the conditions were not favorable for them to work there. And most of them wanted to come back, but the embassy was refusing to allow them come back to Kenya. So that was the main reason they were citing here, even locally.
Kenyan journalist Cyrus Ombati, thank you for joining us on Network Africa. Moving on now, Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed office says it plans to indefinitely postpone its national census because of the large number of people left homeless by conflicts in parts of the country. People currently living in camps need to return to their homes before the census, which was due to have started on April 7, can be conducted. Parliament, which has the final say, will be asked to approve the postponement. More than 1 million people have fled their homes because of largely ethnic-driven conflict in Ethiopia. The census is important to determine the country's population and would influence the allocation of budgets for each region, an issue that tends to spark political tensions. Ethiopia last carried out a census in 2007. Its population is estimated to be about 102.5 million, making it the most populous African state after Nigeria.